Hey, everyone, I'm Olivia Carter, 27 years old, from a small town in Oregon. Picture this. I fell head over heels for a guy who seemed perfect, charming, successful, the whole package. But his family? They saw me as a nobody, a gold digger who didn't belong in their world. They ambushed me with a prenup that would have left me penniless if we ever split. And Ethan, the man I loved? He just sat there silent as they humiliated me. I should have walked away right then. But hold on, because a single phone call changed everything. I inherited $50 million out of nowhere, and what happened next left their jaws on the floor. Stick around to see how I turned their world upside down. And hey, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button to find out how this crazy story ends. My life before Ethan was simple, grounded in the heart of Bend, Oregon. I grew up in a modest ranch-style house, where my dad fixed cars for a living and my mom worked the cash register at a local grocery store. We weren't scraping by, but we pinched pennies. Family vacations? Think camping by the Deschutes River, not jetting off to Hawaii. I always believed passion trumped money. After studying photography at the University of Oregon, I moved to Seattle, chasing dreams bigger than my bank account. I hustled as a freelance photographer, barely covering rent, but I loved capturing moments that told stories. My work got some local buzz, even won a couple of awards, but my paycheck? Let's just say I was still eating ramen more nights than I'd like to admit. Then, Ethan Mitchell walked into my life, and everything changed, or so I thought. Want to know how it all unraveled? Keep watching, because this story is about to get wild. So there I was in Seattle, scraping by as a freelance photographer, my heart full of dreams and my wallet full of, well, not much. That's where I left off, right? My life was simple, but I was chasing what I loved, capturing moments that spoke louder than words. Growing up in Bend, Oregon, I learned early on that happiness didn't come with a price tag. My dad, elbow deep in engine grease, and my mom, ringing up groceries, taught me to find joy in the little things, like stargazing by the river or splitting a homemade pie on Sundays. We lived in a small ranch-style house, nothing fancy, maybe 1,200 square feet. Vacations meant pitching a tent, not boarding a plane. Money was tight, but we had each other, and that was enough. I carried that mindset with me to Seattle, where I moved after college, determined to make it as a photographer. The University of Oregon gave me a degree, but Seattle gave me grit. I was 26, sleeping on friends' couches some nights to save on rent, taking every gig I could: weddings, headshots, even dog portraits. My portfolio grew, and I snagged a few local awards, which felt like a big deal. But the hustle was real. My bank account hovered around $200 most months, and I'd stretch a $10 grocery budget like it was an art form. Still, I was proud. Every photo I took felt like a piece of me, a story I was telling the world. I wasn't chasing wealth, I was chasing meaning. And then, out of nowhere, Ethan Mitchell walked into my life, and suddenly, my world felt a whole lot bigger. It was a rainy April evening at a small art gallery in Seattle's Capitol Hill. I'd poured my heart into a solo exhibit, my first big break. 10 black and white photos of everyday people, each telling a story of resilience. I was adjusting a frame when Ethan approached, all sharp jawline and easy confidence in a tailored blazer. "This photo," he said, pointing to one of a street musician, "it's like you captured his soul." I blushed, caught off guard. Most people just glanced and moved on, but Ethan saw the story I was trying to tell. He was 32, a tech entrepreneur with a startup that was making waves, but he didn't act like it. We talked for hours about art, dreams, even the best food trucks in the city. When he asked me out, I suggested a dive bar with killer tacos instead of some swanky downtown spot. "You're different," he laughed, wiping salsa off his chin. I like that. Our first few months were magic. Ethan wasn't what I expected from someone with his bank account. He drove a beat-up Jeep, not a Tesla, and he'd rather hike in the Olympics than sip cocktails at a yacht club. He'd show up at my tiny studio apartment with a used photography book he'd found at a thrift store, not flashy jewelry. "I want to keep you to myself a bit longer," he'd say when I asked about meeting his family. I didn't push it. I was falling hard, and it felt like we were building something real. But there was this nagging feeling, like a shadow I couldn't quite see. Ethan's vague comments about his family being complicated started to pile up. I brushed it off, too caught up in love to notice the cracks forming. Want to know what happened when those cracks finally broke wide open? Stick around, this story's about to take a sharp turn. So, I just told you about falling for Ethan Mitchell, that Seattle tech guy who seemed too good to be true. Those early months were a whirlwind, tacos and dive bars, late night talks about art, and this feeling that we were meant to be. But that shadow I mentioned? It started creeping in, especially when Ethan dodged questions about his family. They're complicated, he'd say, brushing it off with a smile. I was so wrapped up in our bubble of love that I ignored the warning signs. Big mistake. Because when I finally met the Mitchells, I realized the fairy tale I'd been living in was about to hit a brick wall. Let's dive into how it all started to unravel. It was a crisp October evening, about 6 months into dating Ethan. He invited me to a casual dinner at his family's estate in Bellevue, just east of Seattle. I spent hours picking out a navy dress. Classy but not over the top, something that said I belonged without screaming trying too hard. Ethan squeezed my hand as we pulled up to their mansion, a sprawling 20,000 square foot beast with stone columns and windows that gleamed like they were polished hourly. "You're gonna charm them," he said. I wanted to believe him, but my stomach was doing flips. Inside, the place felt more like a museum than a home. Marble floors, chandeliers, and oil paintings of stern-faced Mitchell ancestors stared down at me. Margaret Mitchell, Ethan's mom, greeted me with a smile as warm as a winter wind. She was 60, draped in a silk scarf that probably cost more than my rent. "So you're the photographer," she said, her voice dripping with curiosity like I was some exotic pet. Charles, Ethan's dad, 65, barely looked up from his phone, muttering a hello. Then there was Daniel, Ethan's older brother, 35, with a smirk that made my skin crawl. "Nice dress," he said, eyeing me. "Thrift store chic." I forced a laugh, but it stung. Dinner was torture. They served tiny portions of something called quail confit, which I could barely choke down. The conversation swirled around me, private islands they'd visited, a friend's new jet, some gala I'd never heard of. I tried to jump in, mentioning a recent photo project for a local nonprofit. Margaret cut me off. "How quaint," she said, sipping her wine. "Do you ever work with real clients?" Daniel piled on, asking about my parents' investments with fake surprise when I said they didn't have any. "Not even a lake house," he pressed, like it was unthinkable. Ethan chimed in, "Not everyone's into that, Dan," but his voice was weak, like he was apologizing for me. I felt like I was shrinking with every word. Margaret's questions about my family weren't questions, they were judgments. "A mechanic and a cashier," she mused. "How grounded." Charles didn't speak, but his silence screamed disapproval. By dessert, a fancy mousse I couldn't taste through my nerves, I was counting the seconds to escape. Ethan held my hand under the table, but it wasn't enough. He saw me drowning and didn't throw a lifeline. "When we left," he said, "they just need time. They're protective after my ex sold stories to the tabloids." I wanted to believe him, but deep down, I knew this was more than caution. It was a warning of what was coming. And trust me, it got so much worse. Curious how I went from feeling like an outsider to flipping their world upside down? Keep watching, this story's about to get wilder. So that dinner with Ethan's family left me rattled. I'd walked into their Bellevue mansion hoping to win them over, but instead, I got cold smiles, cutting remarks, and a clear message: I didn't belong. Margaret's fake curiosity, Charles's silence, Daniel's smirks, it all stung. Ethan's weak defense only made it worse. I should have seen the red flags waving, but love has a way of clouding your judgment. "I told you it was about to get wilder, and trust me, it did." That dinner was just the warm-up. What happened next wasn't just a crack in my fairy tale, it was the moment the whole thing started to shatter. Let's dive into the night the Mitchells showed me exactly who they were. A few months after that brutal dinner, Ethan and I were going strong, or so I thought. We'd moved in together in a cozy Seattle apartment, splitting rent even though he could have bought the building. He proposed on our 1-year anniversary, down on one knee at a quiet spot by Lake Washington, with a ring that was stunning but not flashy, just my style. "I want a life with you," he said, eyes shining. "Not the one my family expects, but ours." I said yes, my heart soaring. For a moment, I believed we could outrun the shadow of the Mitchells. But those red flags, they were piling up. Ethan took late-night calls from his mom, always stepping into another room. He'd cancel our plans if his family snapped their fingers. I ignored it, too in love to admit he was slipping into their orbit. Then came the engagement dinner. Ethan said his parents wanted to host a small celebration at their estate, just immediate family. I saw it as a chance to start fresh, maybe bridge the gap. I spent days planning, picking a sleek black dress, practicing small talk, even researching their favorite wines to bring a bottle as a peace offering. I wanted them to see me, not the small-town girl they'd written off. Ethan seemed nervous but kept saying, "They'll come around. You're amazing." I clung to that, hoping this night would change everything. Spoiler: it did, but not how I expected. We pulled up to the Mitchells' mansion again. That same intimidating sprawl of stone and glass. My stomach churned, but I squared my shoulders. The grand foyer hit me like last time. Marble chandeliers and those creepy ancestor portraits judging me. Margaret greeted us, her pearls glinting, her air kiss missing my cheek by a mile. "What a lovely dress," she said, her tone implying it was anything but. Charles grunted a greeting, his eyes on his phone. Daniel offered me champagne with a wink that felt like a jab. "To the happy couple," he toasted, his smirk saying he didn't mean it. Ethan's sister, Lauren, 30, showed up late with her husband, tossing out, "Sorry, we were at the Andersons' vineyard opening. You wouldn't know them." Dinner was a masterclass in exclusion. They talked over me, about yacht races, a cousin's new penthouse in Manhattan, some charity ball I wasn't invited to. I tried to join in, sharing a story about a photo shoot for a women's shelter. Lauren cut me off. "That's sweet. Do you ever do high-end work?" Daniel asked about my parents' retirement portfolio, feigning shock when I said they didn't have one. "Not even a condo in Palm Springs?" he pressed. Ethan mumbled, "Not everyone's into that." But it felt like he was excusing me, not defending me. My cheeks burned, but I kept smiling, determined not to let them see me crack. By the time dessert rolled around, a fancy lavender panna cotta I barely touched, I was mentally checking out. That's when Margaret set down her spoon and nodded to Charles. He reached into a mahogany sideboard and pulled out a thick folder, sliding it across the table toward me. The word prenuptial glared up in bold type. My heart sank. "Just a formality," Margaret said, her voice smooth as venom. "We need to protect the Mitchell legacy. Nothing personal." But it was personal. Painfully, gut-wrenchingly personal. I looked at Ethan, waiting for him to speak, to say this was a mistake. He stared at his plate, jaw tight, silent. He'd known. He'd brought me here knowing they'd spring this trap. Margaret's smile sharpened. "It's simple, dear. If things don't work out, you leave with what you brought. Nothing more." Daniel leaned back, grinning. "If you love Ethan for him, this shouldn't be an issue, right?" The room felt like it was closing in. I opened the folder with shaking hands. The words swam before me. Waives all rights to assets. No spousal support. Confidentiality clause with penalties. It wasn't a prenup. It was a guillotine. "I'd like a lawyer to review this," I said, my voice barely steady. Lauren laughed, sharp and cruel. "It's not up for debate. Every Mitchell spouse signs it. Tradition." I looked at Ethan again, begging him with my eyes to stand up, to choose me. He finally met my gaze, conflict flickering, but then he said, "It's just paperwork. It doesn't change us." That was the moment my heart broke. Changed everything. I closed the folder, summoning every ounce of strength. "I need time to think about this," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Of course, but we'll need it signed before any wedding plans move forward. The Mitchell name carries weight." The drive home was a fog of silence. As soon as we were in our apartment, I let it all out. "You knew," I said, tears spilling. "You let them ambush me, and you did nothing." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "I tried to talk them out of it, but this is how my family works. It's not a big deal." "Not a big deal?" I snapped. "Your mom called me a gold digger to my face, and you sat there. What am I to you if you won't even fight for me?" He paced, voice rising. "They're my family. They're protecting what's theirs. You don't get it." "I get it," I said quietly. "I've never wanted your money. But I thought you wanted me." He had no answer. That night, as he slept, I stared at the ceiling, the prenup folder looming on our counter like a ticking bomb. I was torn between love and self-respect, and I didn't know which would win. But something bigger was coming. Something that would flip this story upside down. Want to know how I went from humiliated to unstoppable? Keep watching because it's about to get insane. That engagement dinner at the Mitchell's mansion was a gut punch I didn't see coming. I'd walked in hoping to build bridges, but instead, I got a prenup shoved in my face, designed to strip me of everything if Ethan and I ever split. Margaret's icy smile, Daniel's smirks, Lauren's cutting laugh, it was a coordinated attack. Worst of all, Ethan, the man I loved, just sat there silent, letting his family humiliate me. His weak "it's just paperwork" excuse only deepened the betrayal. "I told you things were about to get insane, and they did." That night left me questioning everything, my relationship, my worth, my future. But what happened next wasn't just a turning point, it was the moment the tables started to turn. Let's dive into the chaos that followed. The prenup folder sat untouched on our kitchen counter for 3 days, a constant reminder of the Mitchells' contempt. Ethan and I barely spoke, tiptoeing around the elephant in the room. I'd catch him glancing at the folder, then at me, like he was waiting for me to cave. I wasn't ready to sign away my dignity, but I wasn't ready to lose him either. Love's a tricky thing, it makes you hold on even when you know you should let go. I needed perspective, so I called my best friend, Sarah, who'd known me since our college days in Oregon. We met at a cozy coffee shop in Seattle's Fremont neighborhood, the kind with mismatched chairs and the smell of fresh espresso. The second she saw my face, her smile dropped. Okay, what's wrong? Did Ethan mess up? I spilled everything, the dinner, the prenup's brutal terms, Ethan's silence, my fight with him after. My voice cracked as I described Margaret's words. You leave with nothing. Sarah listened, her jaw tightening with every detail. When I finished, she leaned forward, her coffee untouched. That's not a prenup, Olivia. That's a power play. They're trying to break you. I sighed, twisting my engagement ring around my finger. Maybe I'm overreacting. Rich families do things differently, right? She shook her head. Rich or not, they don't get to treat you like dirt. And Ethan? He should have had your back. If he's not standing up for you now, what happens when you're married? Her words hit hard, but I wasn't ready to face the truth. I still loved Ethan, or at least the version of him I'd fallen for, the guy who loved my photos, not the one who let his family steamroll me. The next day, I took the prenup to a lawyer, Karen Walsh, a no-nonsense family law expert I found through a colleague. Her office was a small, cluttered space downtown, stacked with legal books and framed diplomas. She read the document slowly, her brow furrowing. I've seen a lot of prenups in my 20 years, she said, setting it down. This is one of the most lopsided I've ever come across. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? I asked. She leaned forward. It means if you divorce, you get nothing, no alimony, no property, not even a place to stay during separation. There's also a confidentiality clause that could fine you 6 figures if you ever talk about the Mitchells publicly. I felt sick. Is that legal? I asked. Unfortunately, yes, Karen said. Prenups can be broad. I could suggest changes, a sunset clause after 10 years, protections for any kids, maybe shielding your photography income, but honestly, I wouldn't sign this as it is. I left her office with a list of revisions and a heavier heart. That evening, I tried talking to Ethan. I'm not after your family's money, I said, showing him Karen's suggestions. I just want something fair. He skimmed the papers, his face troubled. My parents won't go for this. The Mitchell Trust has strict rules. You're 32, Ethan, I snapped. When do you start making your own choices? He hesitated, and that pause said everything. The argument escalated, ending with him storming out, muttering about needing space. He came back hours later, reeking of whiskey, with a bouquet of daisies, my favorite, but no real answers. The next morning, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, thinking it was another of Margaret's check-in calls, which had started coming daily, each one more pointed. The florist needs a deposit, she'd say, or the club's booked for the rehearsal dinner. We need that paperwork settled. But this wasn't Margaret. Is this Olivia Carter? A formal male voice asked. I'm David Reynolds from Reynolds & Associates. I'm calling about the estate of your Aunt Evelyn Carter. I frowned, confused. Aunt Evelyn was a distant figure, a quirky inventor who'd moved to California when I was a kid. We'd barely spoken since I was 10. After a family falling out I never fully understood. She passed away 6 months ago, David said. You're named in her will. Can you come to our San Francisco office? I nearly declined. With the prenup drama and Ethan's distance, I was emotionally drained. But something nudged me to agree. Meanwhile, Margaret's pressure didn't let up. Her voicemails piled up, each one a jab. We can't proceed with the wedding planner until this is resolved. Ethan was no help, repeating, just sign it. It doesn't change how I feel. But it had already changed how I felt about him. Sarah called that night, checking in. Have you decided? She asked. I stared at the prenup, still on the counter. If I don't sign, I lose Ethan. If I do, I lose myself. She sighed. Your gut's telling you something. Listen to it. The next day I flew to San Francisco, still reeling from the week's chaos. David Reynolds' office was sleek, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. David, a silver-haired man in his 60s, greeted me warmly. Your Aunt Evelyn was a private woman, he said, opening a file. She regretted losing touch with your family. I nodded, guilty I hadn't known she died. Evelyn made a fortune in Silicon Valley, he continued. She patented software for cloud computing, sold her company for $100 million 8 years ago, and invested well. I blinked, trying to picture the woman who'd once sent me a Polaroid camera for Christmas. She left the bulk of her estate to you, David said, adjusting his glasses. After taxes and charitable bequests, you're receiving approximately $50 million, plus a condo in San Francisco and some tech stocks. The room spun. $50 million. Me, the girl who'd budgeted $10 for groceries last week. Why me? I whispered. Your dad declined any inheritance, David said. Evelyn wanted her wealth to stay in the family, and you're her closest relative. I left his office in a daze, clutching a folder of documents confirming I was now a multimillionaire. As I walked along the Embarcadero, the Prenup's weight lifted. The Mitchells had tried to trap me, thinking I was powerless. Now I had power more than they could imagine. But what would I do with it? And what did it mean for Ethan and me? Want to know how I faced the Mitchells with this bombshell? Keep watching, this is where it gets explosive. I just walked out of that San Francisco law office, my head spinning with the news that I'd inherited $50 million from my Aunt Evelyn. $50 million. The prenup from Ethan's family, designed to leave me with nothing, now felt like a cruel joke. Margaret smug, you leave with what you brought, echoed in my mind, but so did Ethan's silence, his failure to stand up for me. I told you things were about to get explosive, and they did. That inheritance wasn't just money, it was a lifeline, a chance to rewrite my story. But it also left me with a choice: stay with Ethan and fight for our love, or walk away from a family that saw me as less than nothing. Let's dive into what happened next, because this is where the real fireworks started. Back in Seattle, I kept the inheritance a secret, even from Ethan. I needed to see how he'd act without knowing I was now richer than his entire family. The prenup still sat on our counter, a silent wedge between us. Ethan's apologies had grown repetitive, more daisies, more, it's just paperwork, but he never challenged his family's demands. Margaret's voicemails kept coming, each one sharper. The wedding venue needs confirmation, Olivia. We can't wait forever. I felt like I was drowning in their expectations, but the $50 million in my name gave me a strange calm. I wasn't powerless anymore. I met with a financial advisor, Rachel Cohen, in Seattle, recommended by David Reynolds. Her office was a quiet suite overlooking Puget Sound, and she had a no-BS vibe I liked. Sudden wealth is a shock, she said, handing me a coffee. Don't make big moves yet. Take time to process. She walked me through the portfolio: $20 million in investment accounts, $15 million in stocks, a $5 million condo in San Francisco, and $10 million in liquid cash. It was surreal, hearing those numbers tied to me, the girl who'd once skipped meals to afford camera lenses. Rachel's advice stuck. Keep this quiet. Money changes how people see you. I nodded, thinking of Ethan and the Mitchells. Would they respect me more if they knew? Or would it just shift their game? Back home, Ethan noticed I was distracted. You okay? He asked one night as we ate takeout on our couch. You've been off since the dinner. I wanted to scream. Off? Your family tried to erase my future and you let them. But I stayed calm. Just thinking about the prenup, I said. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Can we move past this? I love you. That's what matters. His words felt hollow. Love didn't mean much if he wouldn't fight for me. I changed the subject, but my mind was racing. I needed to test him, to see if he'd choose me over his family without the money changing his math. Margaret's deadline for the prenup was looming 5 days away. She'd planned another dinner at their estate, expecting me to show up with a signed document. Ethan kept saying, it'll be fine once it's done. But I wasn't so sure. I confided in Sarah again, meeting her at our favorite Fremont coffee shop. I inherited $50 million. I blurted out, unable to hold it in. Her jaw dropped. $50 million? Are you serious? I showed her the paperwork on my phone and she whistled. This changes everything. You don't need the Mitchells. You don't even need Ethan. I shook my head. I still love him, Sarah. But I don't know if he loves me enough to stand up to them. She leaned forward. Then don't tell him yet. See what he does at this dinner. If he fails you again, you know what to do. Her words lit a fire in me. I decided to face the Mitchells one last time, not as the small-town girl they mocked, but as someone who knew her worth, even if they didn't. The night before the dinner, Ethan and I argued again. Why are you making this so hard? He snapped, gesturing to the prenup. It's just a formality. A formality? I shot back. Your family wrote a contract that says I'm nothing and you're okay with that. How's that love? He paced, frustrated. They're protecting the family legacy. You don't understand how it works. I understand respect, Ethan, I said, my voice steady. And I'm not getting it from you. He stormed out, leaving me alone with my thoughts. As I lay awake that night, I made a decision. I'd go to that dinner, but I wasn't signing anything. I was done playing their game. The next evening, I dressed carefully for the Mitchells' estate. I chose a tailored emerald green dress I bought with my own money, a small rebellion against their judgment of my thrift store style. It hugged my curves, understated but powerful, like the woman I was becoming. Ethan raised an eyebrow as we drove. New dress? He asked. I felt like a change, I said, smiling. He nodded, oblivious to the storm brewing. My heart pounded as we pulled up to the mansion, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I was ready. The Mitchells were assembled like a firing squad. Margaret, in her usual pearls, gave me a thin smile. Charles barely glanced up from his phone. Daniel smirked, offering me wine with a mocking to the future Mrs. Mitchell. Lauren and her husband arrived late, tossing out a jab about some exclusive party I wouldn't know. Dinner was the same old script, talk of private jets and elite circles with me as the invisible guest. I let their barbs slide, my mind focused on what was coming. When dessert, a delicate pear tart, was cleared, Margaret nodded to Charles. He slid the prenup folder across the table, same as before. Let's wrap this up, she said, her voice all honey and steel. I trust you've had time to see reason. All eyes turned to me. Ethan shifted, uncomfortable but silent. I took a slow sip of water, then looked straight at Margaret. I've had time, I said, my voice calm but firm. And I'm not signing it. The room went still. Margaret's laugh was brittle. Don't be ridiculous. Every Mitchell spouse signs. I won't be a Mitchell spouse, I said, meeting her gaze. Not if it means signing a contract that treats me like a thief instead of a partner. Daniel scoffed. So it is about the money. I turned to him, unflinching. It's about respect. Something this family doesn't understand. I slid the folder back across the table. Ethan finally spoke, his voice strained. Olivia, we talked about this. It's not personal. It's very personal, I said, turning to him. When your family ambushes me, calls me a gold digger, and you do nothing, it's personal. When this prenup says I'd leave with nothing, no matter how long we're married, it's personal. I took off my engagement ring and set it on the table. I'm done. Margaret's face hardened. You're making a mistake. You'll walk away with nothing. I smiled, standing. I'm walking away with my self-respect. And, as it happens, with $50 million. The shock on their faces was electric. Want to know how they reacted when I dropped that bombshell? Keep watching. This showdown's just getting started. I'd just dropped a bombshell at the Mitchells' dinner table, leaving their prenup unsigned and my engagement ring behind. Telling them I was walking away with $50 million, my Aunt Evelyn's inheritance, felt like reclaiming my power. Margaret's brittle smile, Daniel's scoff, Ethan's stunned silence, it was a moment I'd never forget. Their faces, frozen in shock, were proof they'd underestimated me. I'd warned you this showdown was just getting started, and trust me, it was. That night wasn't just about leaving, it was about choosing myself over a love that didn't respect me. Let's dive into what happened after I walked out of that mansion and into a new chapter. The silence in the dining room was deafening as I stood, my emerald green dress catching the chandelier's light. Margaret recovered first, her voice sharp. $50 million? That's absurd. What kind of game are you playing? I met her gaze, unflinching. No game. My Aunt Evelyn left me her estate 6 months ago. I didn't know until last week, but it's real $50 million, a San Francisco condo and stocks. I don't need your money, Margaret. I never did. Daniel's smirk faltered. Convenient timing, he muttered. I turned to him. What's convenient is thinking you could bully me into signing your contract because I was just a photographer. Ethan stood, his face a mix of shock and desperation. Olivia, why didn't you tell me? His voice cracked, and for a moment I saw the man I'd loved, the one who'd shared tacos and dreams with me. But that man hadn't shown up when it counted. Would it have mattered? I asked. Would you have stood up to your family if I told you? Or would you have respected me only because I'm rich now? That's not love, Ethan. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Margaret, ever the strategist, jumped in. This changes things. Perhaps we were hasty. The prenup could be renegotiated, made fairer. I cut her off, my voice steady. There's nothing to negotiate. I'm not marrying Ethan. Not because of the money or the prenup, but because he didn't choose me when it mattered. I deserve a partner, not someone who lets his family treat me like garbage. I looked at Ethan one last time. I loved you, not your name or your wealth. I wish you'd seen that. I turned and walked out, the click of my heels on the marble floor echoing in the stunned silence. As I stepped into the cool Bellevue night, a weight lifted. I was free. The drive back to our apartment was tense. Ethan tried to talk, his voice low. Olivia, please, we can fix this. I'll talk to them. No prenup, I promise. I kept my eyes on the road. It's too late, Ethan. You had a year to stand up for me. You chose them every time. He fell silent, and when we got home I packed a suitcase. I'm staying with Sarah for a while, I said. He didn't argue, just watched me leave, his face etched with regret. At Sarah's place, I collapsed on her couch, tears finally coming. You did the right thing, she said, handing me a mug of tea. You chose yourself. I nodded, but my heart still ached for the life I'd thought we'd build. The next week was a blur of change. I moved out of our apartment for good, leaving my key and a note. I wish you the best, but we're done. I rented a small, furnished loft in Seattle's Pioneer Square. Nothing flashy, just mine. Rachel, my financial advisor, helped me navigate my new reality. We set up trusts, diversified investments, and planned for the San Francisco condo. You're set for life, she said. But don't let it define you. Her words stuck. The money was freedom, not identity. I decided to keep it quiet. Only Sarah and my parents knew. My dad, when I told him, just hugged me. Evelyn always believed in you, he said. Use it to live your way. Margaret didn't give up easily. Her calls came daily, now with a new tone. Less demanding, more calculated. We should discuss the wedding, she'd say, as if I hadn't ended things. We can adjust the terms. I ignored her, but Ethan's texts were harder to dismiss. I messed up, he wrote. I'm telling my family to back off. Can we talk? I didn't respond. His apologies felt like too little, too late, and I couldn't shake the suspicion they were tied to my new wealth. Sarah put it bluntly. He's not sorry he hurt you. He's sorry he lost a millionaire. I threw myself into work, booking new photography gigs to stay grounded. But the Mitchells' shadow lingered. I heard whispers at a gallery event. Rumors they were spreading that I'd tricked Ethan to get close to their fortune. It stung, but I wasn't surprised. They'd always seen me as a threat, and now I was a threat with power. I started planning my next move. Not just to escape their drama, but to build something of my own. The idea of moving to San Francisco grew. The condo, a sleek 2-bedroom overlooking the bay, was waiting, and I could start fresh, maybe open a studio. Photography had always been my anchor, and now I had the means to make it more. One night, as I scrolled through old photos of Ethan and me, my phone buzzed. Another text from him. I'm making changes. I told my mom no more control. Please give me a chance. I stared at the words, tempted for a moment. But then I remembered the dinner, his silence, the prenup's cold terms. Love wasn't enough without respect. I deleted the message and called Sarah. I'm thinking of leaving Seattle, I said. San Francisco, new start. She hooped. That's my girl. Show the Mitchells you don't need them or their drama. As I packed for a scouting trip to San Francisco, I felt a spark I hadn't in months. The $50 million wasn't just a safety net, it was a launch pad. I could build a life that reflected me, not the Mitchells' expectations. But leaving didn't mean I was done with them. Word got back to me that Margaret was furious, calling my exit a stunt. Daniel was telling people I'd played Ethan. Their lies were a new kind of attack, and I knew I'd have to face them again. Not as their victim, but as someone they couldn't touch. Want to know how I turned their rumors against them and built a life they couldn't imagine? Keep watching. This story's about to soar. I just walked away from Ethan and the Mitchells, leaving their prenup unsigned and my engagement ring on their dining room table. Dropping the bombshell about my $50 million inheritance from Aunt Evelyn was the ultimate mic drop moment. Their shocked faces, Margaret's pinched lips, Daniel's dropped jaw, Ethan's pleading eyes were burned into my memory. I told you this story was about to soar, and it did. Leaving Seattle for a fresh start in San Francisco felt like shedding a skin that no longer fit. But the Mitchells weren't done with me, and I wasn't done proving who I could be. Let's dive into how I built a new life and showed them I was more than their assumptions. San Francisco welcomed me with open arms and foggy mornings. I moved into Aunt Evelyn's condo, a sleek two-bedroom high-rise with views of the Bay Bridge that took my breath away. At 27, I'd gone from pinching pennies in Seattle to owning a $5 million home. It was surreal, but I followed my financial advisor Rachel's advice. Don't let the money change who you are. I wanted to stay grounded, so I started small, furnishing the place with thrift store finds mixed with a few splurges, like a vintage camera for my collection. The city felt like a blank canvas, and I was ready to paint. Photography had always been my anchor, so I poured my energy into building something new. I leased a loft in the Mission District and opened Carter Creative Studio, a space for art photography and community projects. With my inheritance, I could afford top-notch equipment and a small team, but I kept it lean: 3 employees, all passionate creatives like me. We focused on storytelling through images, from local artists' exhibits to campaigns for nonprofits. Within 6 months, the studio was buzzing. A feature in a Bay Area arts magazine called us a fresh voice in San Francisco's creative scene, and I felt a pride I hadn't known before. This was mine, built on my terms, not the Mitchells' approval, but freedom came with challenges. Managing $50 million was a learning curve. Rachel helped me set up a foundation to donate to arts education, inspired by Aunt Evelyn's love for innovation. I gave $1 million to fund scholarships for young photographers, which felt more meaningful than any luxury purchase. Still, the wealth changed how people saw me. Old friends from Oregon texted, hinting at loans or opportunities. I kept my circle tight: Sarah, my parents, and a few new San Francisco friends who didn't care about my bank account. I missed Ethan sometimes late at night when I'd scroll through old photos. But then I'd remember his silence at that dinner, and the ache would fade. The Mitchells, predictably, didn't let go quietly. 2 months after I moved, I got a call from Ethan. "I've changed," he said, his voice earnest. "I told my family to back off. I'm done with their rules. Can we start over?" I was at a cafe in Soma, sipping an $8 latte, and his words stirred something: hope, maybe, or just nostalgia. But Sarah's advice echoed. "He's sorry he lost a millionaire." I kept it short. "Ethan, you had your chance. I'm building my life now." He texted a few more times, each message more desperate, but I stopped replying. His timing was too convenient and I wasn't falling for it. Then came Margaret. She emailed me, all polished charm. "Dear Olivia, I'd love to discuss a fresh start. James misses you terribly. Perhaps we could meet." Attached was a new prenup, less brutal but still protecting Mitchell assets. I laughed, deleting it without a reply. She didn't get it. This was never about money. It was about respect, something her family couldn't buy. I heard through a mutual contact that Margaret was spinning a narrative in Seattle's elite circles, calling me ungrateful and opportunistic. Stung, but I was too busy to care. My studio landed a contract with a major environmental nonprofit, and I was planning our first gallery show. San Francisco was teaching me who I could be. I joined a photography collective, mentored young artists, and even started hiking in Marin County on weekends, finding peace in the redwoods. The city's energy, its mix of grit and beauty, matched my own. I wasn't the small-town girl the Mitchells had mocked, nor was I defined by my wealth. I was Olivia, building a legacy of creativity and impact. My parents visited, awestruck by the condo. "Evelyn would be proud," my mom said, tearing up. "You're doing this right." But the Mitchells' shadow crept back. 4 months into my new life, I got a Google alert for my name. A Seattle gossip blog had posted a story: local heiress allegedly manipulated aunt for $50 million fortune. It quoted sources close to the Mitchell family, claiming I'd coerced Evelyn into changing her will. My stomach dropped. The lies were vicious, painting me as a schemer who'd used Ethan to climb the social ladder. I called Sarah, furious. "They're trying to ruin me," I said. "They can't handle that." I walked away. She was blunt. "You're a threat now. They want to control the story." I wasn't letting them win. I contacted David Reynolds, Evelyn's lawyer, who sent me a letter Evelyn had written before her death. "Olivia," it read, "you remind me of myself, curious, bold, unafraid to create. My wealth is yours because I trust you to use it well." The words were a lifeline. I hired a PR consultant, a sharp woman named Lisa, who suggested I go public, not with a fight, but with truth. We organized a gallery show at my studio, Light in the Frame, showcasing my photos alongside young artists. All proceeds $200,000 went to a youth arts program. At the opening, I shared Evelyn's letter with the press, letting her words silence the rumors. The event was a hit, and the blog post faded into obscurity. The Mitchells' lies backfired. A San Francisco Chronicle piece praised my work in philanthropy, calling me a rising star with a heart. I didn't gloat, I didn't need to. I was living my truth, and that was enough. But I wasn't naive. The Mitchells were still out there, and I knew they'd try again to drag me down. I was ready, not as their victim, but as a woman who'd learned her worth. Want to know how I faced their next move and turned their own game against them? Keep watching. This story's about to hit new heights. I just turned the Mitchells' lies against them, using Aunt Evelyn's letter and a charity gallery show to shut down their vicious rumors. My San Francisco studio was thriving, and I was building a life that felt authentically mine. I told you this story was hitting new heights, and it was. But the Mitchells weren't done trying to claw me back into their drama. What happened next wasn't just another attack. It was a chance to prove I'd grown beyond their reach. Let's dive into how I faced their final jab and came out stronger. 6 months after the gallery show, I was at a San Francisco art conference, speaking on a panel about creativity and impact. Carter Creative Studio had just landed a contract with the National Museum, and I was riding high. During a break, I spotted Margaret Mitchell in the crowd, her pearls gleaming under the lights. My stomach tightened, but I kept my cool. She approached me at the reception, her smile as calculated as ever. "Your work is impressive," she said, voice dripping with false warmth. "But I hear your studio's struggling financially. Overextended, perhaps." I froze. It was a lie, but her tone suggested she'd spread it already. I'd heard whispers of new rumors, Margaret telling Seattle elites my studio was a money pit, funded by questionable wealth. This was their latest move to discredit me. I smiled back, unfazed. "My studio's doing better than ever, Margaret. You should visit sometime." She blinked, caught off guard by my confidence. "Ethan's engaged again," she added, fishing for a reaction. "A proper match this time." I nodded, unbothered. "I wish him well." Her eyes narrowed, realizing I wasn't the same woman she tried to break. Later, I called Lisa, my PR consultant. We released a statement highlighting my studio's success, 2 major contracts, and $100,000 in recent donations. The rumors fizzled, and Margaret's attempt to undermine me backfired. Facing her, I felt no anger, just clarity. I'd outgrown their games. My life, my work, my values was my victory. Want to know how I sealed this journey and shared its lessons? Keep watching, the final chapters coming up. I just faced Margaret Mitchell one last time at that San Francisco art conference, shutting down her latest attempt to tarnish my name with rumors about my studio's finances. Her smug jab and news of Ethan's new engagement didn't shake me. I'd grown beyond their reach. I told you the final chapter was coming, and here it is. This isn't just about walking away. It's about the lessons that reshaped my life and the wisdom I want to share. Let's wrap up this journey. Looking back, that prenup wasn't just a contract, it was a mirror showing me who the Mitchells really were and who Ethan wasn't. The $50 million inheritance from Aunt Evelyn gave me freedom, but the real gift was learning my worth. Money amplifies who you are. For the Mitchells, it fueled entitlement, making them cling to power. For me, it opened doors to live authentically, building Carter Creative Studio and funding scholarships for young artists. I learned that self-respect is the truest wealth. No prenup can take that away. Here's the lesson I carry. Set boundaries in every relationship. If someone, lover, friend, or family, doesn't value you, have the courage to walk away. You deserve people who see your worth without a dollar sign attached. I apply this daily, choosing clients and friends who align with my values. It's not always easy, but it's liberating. Leaving Ethan hurt, but staying would have cost me more. My dignity, my voice, my truth. Now I'm thriving. My studio's booked through next year, and I'm planning a national exhibit for underrepresented photographers. San Francisco's my home, and I've found peace in its chaos. I'm dating again cautiously with someone who respects me as an equal. The Mitchells? They're a footnote. Their drama irrelevant to the life I've built. What about you? Have you ever had to choose between love and self-respect? What did you do and how did it shape you? Drop your story in the comments, I'd love to hear it. If this resonated, hit that like button, subscribe, and share with someone who needs to know their worth is enough. Thanks for joining my journey. Keep shining, you've got this.